They thought she was a fraud. A 65-year-old woman, trembling in a military courtroom, accused of wearing stolen valor. Her medals, they said, were worthless fakes. And when she tried to speak, a decorated commander didn't just silence her. He struck her, a sharp, brutal slap that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Officers laughed. Soldiers sneered. Justice seemed dead. But then the doors exploded open. Boots thundered. And a 4-star general walked in, a man whose name alone could end careers. His eyes found the old woman on the floor. And what he did next changed everything. This is her story. The story of Sergeant Major Elena Reyes. And before we begin, if you love true stories of courage, honor, and redemption, subscribe to USX Stories and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss what happens next. The military courtroom was a cold, unforgiving place. Rows of wooden benches lined both sides, filled with uniformed soldiers, decorated officers, legal advisors, and curious onlookers. At the front, behind an elevated desk, sat Judge Advocate Colonel Harrison, a stern man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many broken promises. And at the defendant's table, hunched and small, sat Elena Reyes. She was 65 years old. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun, revealing a face creased by time, sun, and sorrow. Her hands, gnarled and spotted with age, rested on the table before her, trembling slightly. She wore her old dress uniform, the same one she'd worn decades ago, but now it hung loose on her thinning frame. Across her chest, 5 medals caught the harsh courtroom lights. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, 2 Army Commendation Medals, and a Distinguished Service Cross. But today, those medals meant nothing. Mrs. Reyes. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the murmurs. You stand accused of stolen valor, of wearing military decorations you did not earn, of fabricating a service record that never existed. How do you plead? Elena's lips parted. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Not guilty, sir. Laughter rippled through the room. At the prosecution's table, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Drummond rose to his feet. He was a towering man in his mid-40s, his uniform crisp and perfect, his chest gleaming with rows of medals earned in recent conflicts. His jaw was sharp, his eyes cold, and his reputation ruthless. Your Honor, Drummond began, his voice dripping with disdain, this woman is a disgrace. She claims to have served in Vietnam as a combat medic. She claims to have saved lives under fire, to have earned these medals through acts of bravery. But there's one problem. He turned to face Elena, his expression twisted with contempt. There are no records, no deployment logs, no eyewitness accounts, nothing. He slammed a folder onto the table. What we do have is evidence that Elena Reyes worked as a nurse's aide in a civilian hospital during the Vietnam War. She never enlisted. She never deployed. She never served. Gasps filled the courtroom. Elena's hands tightened into fists. That's not true, she said louder now. I served. I was there. Silence. Drummond roared. He strode toward her, his boots echoing on the marble floor. You're a liar, a fraud. You bought those medals at some pawn shop and convinced yourself you were a hero. I didn't. You disgrace every real soldier in this room. And then he did it. His hand flew across her face in a vicious slap that cracked like thunder. Elena's head snapped to the side. Her glasses flew off, clattering onto the floor. Gasps turned to shocked silence. A few people rose from their seats, but no one intervened. Elena sat frozen, her cheek burning red, tears welling in her eyes, not from pain, but from humiliation. That, Drummond said coldly, is what frauds deserve. The room erupted. Some soldiers nodded in approval. Others looked away, uncomfortable but silent. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, but the damage was done. Elena sat there, trembling, her hand pressed to her cheek, staring at the floor. And then, the double doors at the back of the courtroom exploded open. Boots struck marble with the force of rolling thunder. 1 step, 2, 3. The murmurs died instantly. Every head turned. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform immaculate. But it wasn't the uniform that commanded attention. It was the stars. For silver stars gleamed on his shoulders. A 4-star general. The kind of man whose word could topple governments, whose presence demanded absolute respect. His face was weathered, carved by decades of service. His eyes, gray and sharp as steel, swept across the room, taking in everything. The mocking officers, the smirking soldiers, the trembling old woman at the defendant's table, and Lieutenant Commander Drummond, standing over her like a predator. The general's jaw tightened. He walked forward slowly, deliberately. Soldiers snapped to attention. Officers straightened. Even the judge rose from his seat. General Castellano, Colonel Harrison stammered. "Sir, we weren't expecting." The general raised one hand. Silence fell like a curtain. His eyes locked onto Drummond. "Did you just strike that woman?" Drummond's confidence faltered. "Sir, she's a fraud." I asked you a question, Commander. Did you strike her?" "Yes, sir, but—" "Stand down." It wasn't a request. It was an order that could end a career. Drummond stepped back, his face pale. General Castellano turned toward Elena. She sat slumped in her chair, her cheeks still red, her eyes wet with unshed tears. She looked up at him, confused, afraid. And then the general did something no one expected. He saluted, a crisp, perfect military salute, held with absolute respect. The room froze. Officers' mouths fell open. Soldiers stared in disbelief. Even the judge looked stunned. Elena blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Slowly, shakily, she rose to her feet and returned the salute, her hand trembling but steady. The general held it for 5 full seconds before lowering his hand. "Sergeant Major Elena Riz," he said, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "It's been a long time." General Castellano turned to face the room. His gaze swept across the rows of soldiers and officers, many of whom now looked deeply uncomfortable. "I'm going to tell you a story," he began. "A true story. About a war most of you have only read about in history books. About a woman who saved my life and the lives of countless others, when we had nothing left but blood and prayer." He gestured toward Elena. "This woman is not a fraud. She is one of the finest soldiers I have ever served with. And if any of you doubt that, you're about to learn just how wrong you are." He took a deep breath. "It was 1968, the Tet Offensive. I was a 23-year-old lieutenant, fresh out of West Point, leading a platoon in the Mekong Delta. We were supposed to be on a routine patrol, but nothing in Vietnam was routine." His voice grew quieter, heavier. "We walked into an ambush. Viet Cong fighters hit us from 3 sides. Automatic fire, grenades, mortars. Half my men went down in the first 30 seconds. I took shrapnel to the leg and chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was drowning in my own blood." He paused, his eyes distant, seeing ghosts. And that's when she appeared. Sergeant Elena Reyes, 24 years old, a combat medic attached to our unit. She ran into that kill zone without hesitation, bullets tearing up the ground around her. She threw herself over me, shielding my body with hers, and started working. Elena's tears flowed freely now, but she didn't look away. She patched my chest wound with her bare hands. The general continued. "Stop the bleeding. Drag me. Drag me." A man twice her size, 30 meters to cover while taking fire. Then she went back. She went back into that hellfire 4 more times. 4 more times. She pulled out every wounded man she could reach. His voice cracked. 3 men died that day, but 9 of us lived. 9 of us came home because of her. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Elena's quiet sobs. She earned the Bronze Star that day, General Castellano said, for valor under fire. She earned the Purple Heart 3 months later, when a mortar round collapsed a bunker on top of her while she was treating casualties. Broke her back, shattered her ribs. They told her she'd never walk again. He looked at Elena, his eyes fierce with pride. But she did. She healed, and she went back. She served 3 tours in Vietnam. 3. She saved more lives than I can count. And when she finally came home, broken and scarred, the government lost her records. Administrative error, budget cuts, bureaucratic incompetence. Her service, her sacrifice, erased by a filing mistake. Gasps echoed through the room. Drummond looked like he'd been punched in the gut. She spent 40 years trying to get those records restored. The general said, 40 years fighting the same government she bled for. And when she finally gave up, when she accepted that history had forgotten her, she kept those medals, not because she wanted glory, but because they were all she had left of the people she saved, the brothers and sisters who didn't make it home. He turned to Drummond, his eyes cold as winter. And you struck her. You called her a liar. You humiliated a decorated war hero in front of her peers. Drummond's face was ashen. Sir, I didn't know. You didn't ask. The general's voice was sharp as a blade. You didn't investigate. You didn't care. You saw an old woman with medals and assumed she was a fraud because it was easier than doing your job. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, I have documentation. Service records I personally retrieved from the National Archives. Eyewitness testimony from 7 surviving members of my platoon. Medical records from the VA. Everything you need to prove beyond any shadow of doubt that Sergeant Major Elena Reyes is exactly who she says she is. He placed a thick folder on the judge's desk. And I'm prepared to testify, under oath, that this woman is a hero, a true American hero, and anyone who says otherwise will answer to me. The trial didn't last another hour. The evidence was overwhelming. The general's testimony was unshakable. One by one, the accusations crumbled. The case against Elena Reyes was dismissed with prejudice. Lieutenant Commander Drummond was removed from the courtroom in disgrace, facing disciplinary action for assault and conduct unbecoming an officer. And Elena, Sergeant Major Elena Reyes, stood at attention as a judge formally recognized her service, her sacrifice, and her valor. When it was over, when the courtroom finally emptied, General Castellano approached her. She looked up at him, this man she'd saved a lifetime ago, and smiled through her tears. Thank you, she whispered. He shook his head. No, Sergeant Major. Thank you. You gave me my life. The least I could do was give you back your honor. She saluted him one last time, and he returned it, holding it with the respect she had always deserved. Elena Reyes was laid to rest with full military honors. She passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the medals she had earned and the memories she had carried. General Castellano delivered the eulogy. 7 veterans from her unit served as pallbearers. A 21-gun salute echoed across Arlington National Cemetery. And on her headstone, beneath her name and dates, were 5 simple words. She saved us all. The moral of this story is simple but profound. Never judge a person's worth by what you see on the surface. True valor isn't always loud. True sacrifice isn't always recognized. And true heroes often walk among us, quiet and unnoticed, carrying burdens we'll never understand. Honor them, respect them, believe them, because one day you might need them to save you too. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the heroes we too often forget, then subscribe to USX Stories. Hit that notification bell. Share this video. And never let the world forget the Elena Reyes of our history, the men and women who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. This is USX Stories, where courage is remembered and heroes never die.